Hello everyone. My name is Dylan Prescott, and before we dive into today's story, I need you to do something for me. Look around your room right now. Make sure you're alone, because what I'm about to share with you, what I'm about to reveal, it's going to change everything you thought you knew about the places we eat, the places we trust, the places we think are safe. You see, I used to work at a fast food restaurant, one of the biggest chains in the world, the kind of place you've probably eaten at dozens of times without thinking twice. And for almost 3 years, I've kept this secret buried deep inside me, locked away in a part of my mind I tried desperately to forget. But the nightmares won't stop, the memories won't fade, and I know now that staying silent, that's not protecting me anymore. It's just letting them continue, letting them feed. Before I begin, though, I can see that 82% of you watching right now haven't hit that subscribe button, and I really need you to do that. Not just for me, but because if something happens to me, if I suddenly stop posting, you'll know why. So please smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and drop a like on this video. Also, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, what time it is there, and most importantly, have you ever experienced something at work that you just couldn't explain? Something that made your skin crawl? I read every single comment, every single message, and some of your stories. They've helped me realize I'm not alone in this. Now let's begin. It was late autumn when everything started. October. The kind of October where the air turns crisp and the leaves crunch under your feet and the sun sets earlier each day until you feel like darkness is swallowing the world piece by piece. I had just turned 19, barely out of my first year at university, and I was broke. Not just regular college student broke, but the kind of broke where you're counting coins to buy ramen, where you're avoiding your landlord's calls, where you're one unexpected expense away from having to move back in with your parents and admit that maybe you weren't ready for independence after all. My parents, they'd been supportive at first, helped me get set up in a tiny apartment off campus. But by summer they'd made it clear that the bank of mom and dad was closed. If I wanted to keep living away from home, if I wanted to maintain even a shred of independence, I needed to get a job, any job, and start paying my own way. So when I saw that hiring sign in the window of the fast food restaurant near the waterfront, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about red flags or warning signs. I just saw dollar signs, saw a way to keep the lights on for another month. The restaurant was located in the old part of town. You know the kind of area I'm talking about, the part that used to be thriving back in the 70s and 80s, when the factories were running, when the docks were busy, when money flowed through like a river. But then the jobs left, the factories closed, the ships stopped coming, and what remained was this hollow shell of what used to be. Abandoned warehouses with broken windows, empty lots overgrown with weeds, streets where the pavement was more cracks than concrete. The building itself had that same worn-down quality. The sign out front was faded, colors bleached by decades of sun. The windows were clean enough, but you could see where the frames were rotting, where water damage had left permanent stains on the walls. And when you walked inside, there was this smell, this underlying scent that hit you immediately. Old grease, sure, every fast food place has that. But there was something else, something underneath, something sweet and rotten at the same time. Like fruit that had been left out too long, like meat that was just starting to turn. It was faint, so faint that most people probably didn't even notice it. But once you did notice it, once your brain registered that wrongness, you couldn't stop smelling it. It was everywhere, in the walls, in the floor, in the very air you breathed. I walked up to the counter that first day, application in hand, and that's when I met Wyatt Langley. He was the manager, mid-40s maybe, though he looked older. Like life had been particularly unkind to him. His face was gaunt, cheeks hollow, and he had these deep-set eyes that were perpetually shadowed, like he hadn't slept properly in years, maybe decades. His hair was thin, graying at the temples, and when he smiled at me, and he did smile, it never quite reached those tired eyes. There was something hollow about it, something performative. The interview, if you could even call it that, lasted maybe 5 minutes. He barely looked at my application, barely asked about my experience or my availability. Instead, he asked strange questions, questions that should have been red flags, but I was too desperate to see them as such. Can you work nights? He asked, his voice flat, emotionless. Sure, I'm pretty flexible. Are you reliable? Can you be counted on to show up when scheduled? Absolutely. I really need this job, so. Then he leaned forward slightly, his eyes finally meeting mine, and there was something in his gaze, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Can you keep your mouth shut when needed? Can you mind your own business and just do your job without asking too many questions? I should have walked out right then. I should have recognized that as the warning it was, but instead I laughed it off, thought he was just being dramatic about workplace gossip or corporate policies. Yeah, of course. I'm not a troublemaker if that's what you're worried about. He stared at me for a long moment, long enough that the silence became uncomfortable. And then he nodded slowly. You start tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. And just like that, I had the job. No background check, no second interview, no trial shift. Just, you're hired, be here tomorrow. Looking back now, I realize how strange that was. How unusual. But at the time, I was just grateful, relieved. I finally had a way to pay my bills. That first shift started normally enough. Wyatt showed me around the restaurant, taught me how to work the register, how to use the fryers, how to assemble the orders. It was all standard fast food stuff, mindless repetitive tasks that anyone could learn in an hour. The kitchen was old but functional. Everything had that worn quality like it had been used hard for years. The tiles on the floor were cracked in places. The metal surfaces were scratched and dented, and that smell, that underlying wrongness, it was stronger back here in the kitchen, especially near the walk-in freezer. Wyatt introduced me to the rest of the evening crew, which consisted of exactly one other person, Asher Monroe. He was about my age, maybe 20 or 21, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a quick, easy smile that made him seem friendly, approachable. He shook my hand enthusiastically, welcomed me to the team, made some joke about how I'd be running the place in a month. But there was something about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. His smile was genuine, but his eyes had this haunted quality, like he'd seen something that had fundamentally changed him, altered his perception of reality. There was one other employee who worked the morning shifts, a woman named Morgan Hawthorne. I only met her briefly that first day, passing each other as her shift ended and mine began. She was in her 30s, thin, almost gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. When Wyatt introduced us, she barely acknowledged me, just gave me this look, this pitying look, like she knew something I didn't, like she was looking at a dead man walking. Then she grabbed her coat and left without saying a word. Don't mind Morgan, Asher said as we watched her hurry out to the parking lot. She's not big on small talk, keeps to herself mostly. How long has she worked here? I asked. Asher's smile faltered slightly. Long time, longer than me. She's been here. I don't know, 5 years, maybe 6. He paused, then added quietly. She used to be different, or so I've heard. More friendly, more outgoing. But something changed, something happened, and now she's just... He trailed off, shrugged. Well, you'll understand eventually. This place, it changes people. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would. God help me. I would. My first 2 weeks were exactly what you'd expect from a fast food job. Boring, repetitive, occasionally frustrating when dealing with difficult customers. But nothing weird, nothing that couldn't be explained. I worked mostly evening shifts, 6 until midnight, and the routine was simple. Take orders, make food, clean up, repeat. The customers were the usual mix, families grabbing a quick dinner, teenagers hanging out, workers stopping by after their shifts, drunk people stumbling in after the bars closed looking for greasy food to soak up the alcohol. The pay was minimum wage, the work was mind-numbing, but it was money, and that's all I cared about. I was finally able to pay my rent on time, buy groceries, even go out with friends occasionally. Life was okay, not great, but okay. And I started to relax, started to think that maybe this job wouldn't be so bad after all, that maybe I could work here through the school year, save up some money, get back on my feet. But then, in my 3rd week, everything changed. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesdays were always slow. The dinner rush had ended hours ago, and we'd only had a handful of customers since then. Just a few stragglers, people passing through. Nothing memorable. Asher and I were cleaning up, getting ready for the potential late-night rush that sometimes happened around 11 when the bars closed. We were talking about something. Some TV show, maybe. I don't remember. What I do remember, what I'll never forget, is the moment the door opened. The bell above the entrance chimed. That generic little ding that happens 100 times a shift. Usually I wouldn't even look up. But something made me turn. Some instinct, some primal part of my brain that recognized danger, even before my conscious mind could process what I was seeing. The man who walked in was wrong. That's the only word I can use, wrong. He was tall, very tall, probably 6'3" or 4, wearing a long dark coat that reached almost to the ground even though it was a mild autumn evening, not cold enough to warrant that kind of heavy clothing. His face was pale, not just pale like someone who didn't get enough sun, but pale like milk, like paper, like something that had never seen the sun at all. And his eyes, God, his eyes, they were amber, bright amber, like a cat's eyes, like backlit honey. And they seemed to catch the fluorescent lights of the restaurant in a way that wasn't natural. They almost seemed to glow. And when he walked, he moved too smoothly, too fluidly, like he was gliding rather than walking, like his feet weren't quite touching the ground. He approached the counter slowly, deliberately, his eyes fixed on me, never blinking, never looking away. And when he reached the register, when he was close enough that I could smell him, cigarettes, and that sweet rotting smell that permeated the restaurant, but stronger, so much stronger, he leaned forward slightly and spoke. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it seemed to echo in my head, seemed to reverberate in a way that made my teeth ache. I'd like the special. I blinked, confused, my customer service training kicking in automatically. Which special are you referring to, sir? We have a few combo meals that are currently on promotion. The number 3 comes with a drink and fries. Or, if you're looking for something bigger, the family meal. He smiled, and that's when I saw his teeth. They were too white, too perfect, too many, more than a human mouth should have. No, he said, his smile widening. Not those. The special. The one that isn't on the menu. The one you keep in the back. My brain was struggling to process what was happening. This had to be some kind of joke. Some prank, maybe? I'm sorry, sir, but I don't know what you're talking about. We only have what's on the menu board. If there's something specific you're looking for, maybe I can. Your colleague knows. The man's eyes shifted from me to Asher, who I suddenly realized had gone completely still behind me. Don't you? Asher, you know exactly what I want. I turned to look at Asher, and what I saw made my blood run cold. His face had drained of all color. His eyes were wide with something that looked like pure terror. His hands were shaking, actually shaking, and he was staring at this man like he was looking at death itself. I'll get the manager. Asher's voice came out as barely a whisper, cracking on the last word, and then he turned and practically ran toward the back office, leaving me alone at the counter with this thing, pretending to be a man. The silence that followed was suffocating. The man never took his eyes off me, just kept staring with that too wide smile and those glowing amber eyes. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, could feel sweat starting to bead on my forehead despite the air conditioning. The normal sounds of the restaurant, the hum of the refrigerators, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, the distant sound of traffic outside, all of it seemed muted distant, like we were in a bubble separated from the rest of reality. I tried to think of something to say, something to break the tension, but my mouth was dry and my tongue felt too thick. So I just stood there frozen, while this thing that looked like a man studied me with eyes that were definitely not human. After what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute or two, I heard footsteps approaching from the back. Wyatt emerged from the office, and the moment he saw the man at the counter, everything about his demeanor changed. His usual tired expression shifted to something else, something that looked like a mixture of fear and resignation. His shoulders slumped. His face somehow became even more haggard, and when he spoke, his voice was flat, defeated. Right, yes, the special. He turned to me, and his eyes, there was something in his eyes that looked almost apologetic. Dylan, go help Asher in the back. He's having trouble with the dishes. I'll handle this customer. But I don't. Now, Dylan, the sharpness in his voice left no room for argument. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something else, Something urgent, almost desperate. Go to the back now. I nodded slowly, unable to speak, and walked toward the kitchen. My legs felt weak, unstable, and I could feel those amber eyes following me, tracking my movement until I disappeared through the doorway. I found Asher in the back area, near the industrial sink. He was leaning against the counter with both hands gripping the edge, so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He was breathing hard, almost hyperventilating, his chest rising and falling rapidly. When he heard me approach, he looked up and I saw something in his face that terrified me more than the strange customer had. I saw absolute hopeless fear. Asher, what the hell is going on? My voice came out shakier than I intended. What special is that guy talking about? Why did you freak out like that? He stared at me for a long moment, and I watched as he struggled with something internally, like he was trying to decide whether to tell me the truth or maintain whatever lie he'd been living with. Finally he spoke, his voice low and urgent. Listen to me very carefully, Dylan. And I mean very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once, and then we're never going to talk about it again. He paused, took a shaky breath. If anyone, and I mean anyone, ever comes into this restaurant and asks for the special, the one that's not on the menu, you do not ask questions. You do not try to help them. You do not engage with them at all. You immediately get wired. You let him handle it, and then you forget it ever happened. Do you understand me? No, I don't understand. What are you talking about? What's special? Why? Dylan. He grabbed my shoulders suddenly, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt, his face inches from mine. There are things about this place, things about this job, things that you do not want to know about. Trust me, please trust me. I have been working here for 2 years, 2 long years, and the only reason I'm still here, the only reason I'm still alive, is because I learned very quickly to keep my head down, to not ask questions, to just do my job and ignore anything weird or strange or impossible that I see. His voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. If you're smart, if you want to survive, you'll do exactly the same thing. Before I could respond, before I could process what he was saying, Wyatt's voice called out from the front of the restaurant. Asher, I need you in the freezer now. The effect on Asher was immediate and dramatic. What little color had returned to his face drained away completely. His grip on my shoulders loosened. His hands started trembling again. And for just a moment, I saw something in his eyes that looked like pure existential dread. He took a deep breath, seemed to steel himself, and then walked slowly toward the walk-in freezer, like a man walking toward his own execution. I followed at a distance, watching, try to understand. Wyatt was standing by the heavy metal door of the freezer, holding it open, his face expressionless. When Asher reached him, Wyatt gestured inside and Asher entered, moving past the normal storage area, past the racks of frozen patties and bags of fries, toward the very back where the shadows grew deeper and the fluorescent lights didn't quite reach. From where I stood, I could see them moving behind the shelves, deeper into the freezer, and then I heard something that made every hair on my body stand on end. A door opening, metal scraping against metal, the sound of heavy locks being undone, and beneath that, below the mechanical sounds, something else, something that sounded like breathing, deep, rasping, wet, definitely not human, and along with the breathing, a sound that might have been words, voices, multiple voices speaking in unison, too low for me to make out the words, but definitely they're definitely real. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop suddenly, or maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe it was just the fear crawling up my spine making me shiver. I stood there frozen, unable to move, unable to look away from that freezer door. And then I heard something else, something that made my blood turn to ice in my veins. Asher screamed. Not a shout, not a yell, but a scream, high-pitched and full of absolute terror. The kind of scream that comes from somewhere primal, somewhere beyond rational thought. It lasted for maybe 3 seconds, and then it was cut off abruptly, followed by silence, terrible suffocating silence. My legs started moving before my brain could catch up. I backed away from the freezer, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break my ribs. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get out, to leave this place and never come back. But I was paralyzed, caught between the need to flee and the horrifying fascination of waiting to see what would happen next. The freezer door remained closed for what felt like an eternity. Minutes passed, 5, 10. I don't know. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Finally, the door opened with a heavy metallic groan, and Wyatt emerged alone. His face was even more haggard than before, if that was possible. His skin was gray, waxy, and there were dark stains on his sleeves, stains that looked wet. That looked like... I forced myself not to think about what they looked like. When he saw me standing there, staring, his expression hardened. "Dylan, you can go home early tonight." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I'll finish closing up." "Where's Asher?" The words came out before I could stop them. Wyatt's eyes met mine, and for just a second, I saw something flicker in them, something dangerous. "He's dealing with inventory. Special inventory in the back. You should go home. You look tired." "But, go home, Dylan." The edge in his voice was unmistakable now. A warning, a threat barely concealed. Now, I didn't argue, couldn't argue. I grabbed my jacket from the hook near the back door, clocked out with shaking hands, and walked out into the parking lot. The night air was cool, refreshing, but it did nothing to calm the panic rising in my chest. I got to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and just sat there, trying to process what I'd just experienced. After a few minutes, I don't know what possessed me, curiosity, stupidity, concern for Asher, but I found myself walking back toward the restaurant, staying in the shadows. I approached the front window and peered inside. The lights were still on. I could see Wyatt standing in the middle of the dining area, just standing there, staring at the freezer door. And as I watched, I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat. The freezer door had moved, just slightly, like something on the other side had bumped against it or pushed it, testing it. And Wyatt just stood there watching, not moving, not reacting, just watching with that same exhausted expression. I got back in my car, drove home, and spent the entire night lying awake in bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those amber eyes, heard that breathing from behind the freezer, heard Asher's scream. When my alarm went off for my next shift the following evening, I stared at it for a long time, seriously considering calling in sick, considering quitting, considering just packing up and leaving town entirely. But I didn't, because I needed the money, because I told myself I'd imagined it, hallucinated it, because I was young and stupid and convinced myself that there had to be a rational explanation. So I got dressed, drove to work, and walked through those doors again. Asher was there. He was alive, working the fryers like nothing had happened. When he saw me, he smiled, that same easy, friendly smile. "Hey Dylan, how's it going?" The relief I felt was overwhelming. I convinced myself during the sleepless night that something terrible had happened to him, that scream had been his last. But here he was, fine, normal. Maybe I really had imagined everything. "Hey," I approached him cautiously. Are you okay?" "Last night, in the freezer." The smile disappeared from his face instantly. His eyes went hard, cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "But you screamed. I heard you scream." "You didn't hear anything." His voice was sharp now, almost angry. "Nothing happened last night. Nothing ever happens. Do you understand me?" I stared at him, searching his face for some explanation, some acknowledgement of what I'd witnessed. But his expression was closed off, guarded. Then I noticed something. His hands, they were shaking slightly. A tremor he couldn't quite control. And when he turned back to the fryer, I saw something else. On the back of his neck, visible above his collar, there were marks. 3 parallel lines, like scratches, or claw marks, deep enough that they'd scabbed over but still fresh, still raw. That's when I realized. He did remember. He knew exactly what happened. But something, fear or threats, or maybe something worse, was keeping him silent, keeping him compliant. Over the next few days, I started paying attention, really paying attention, to things I'd previously overlooked. The high turnover rate, for example. In the 3 weeks I'd been working there, I'd already seen 2 other employees quit, just not show up one day. Their names removed from the schedule with no explanation. When I asked Wyatt about it, he just shrugged and said some people couldn't handle the work. Then there was Morgan, the morning shift worker. I started coming in early sometimes, overlapping with the end of her shift by 15 or 20 minutes, and I watched her. She never smiled, never made eye contact. She did her job with mechanical efficiency, cleaning, restocking, preparing for the evening shift. But she never went near the freezer, never. If something needed to be retrieved from cold storage, she'd wait until Wyatt or someone else could get it. She'd rather stand there wasting time than open that door. One day I tried to talk to her, tried to ask her about the restaurant, how long she'd been there, what it was like when she first started. She looked at me with those dead eyes, those haunted eyes, and said quietly, "I used to ask questions too, used to be curious. That was before I understood, before I learned that some prices are too high, even for answers." Then she grabbed her coat and left, leaving me standing there with more questions than ever. But the worst part, the part that really started to eat away at me, was the customers. About once or twice a week, always late at night, always when the restaurant was nearly empty, someone would come in, someone who was wrong, just like that first man had been wrong. They were all different ages, different appearances, different backgrounds, but they all had same quality, that same otherness. And they all had strange eyes, amber, pale blue so light they were almost white, sometimes violet so deep it looked black unless the light hit them just right. And they all knew to ask for the special, the one not on the menu, every single time. Wyatt would handle it personally. He'd take them to the back. I'd hear that inner door open in the freezer, hear those sounds, that breathing, those voices, and Wyatt would emerge alone. The customer never came back out through the front. When I asked where they went, Wyatt said there was a back exit, but I'd walked around the building multiple times. There was no back exit. The back of the restaurant was a solid brick wall, no doors, no windows. Then there was the meat. We went through an absurd amount of meat at our location. The delivery truck came 3 times a week, massive shipments, crates and crates of frozen patties, chicken, beef, pork, more than our customer volume could possibly justify. I started checking the inventory logs when I had access to the office. The numbers didn't make sense. We should have been drowning in excess. Yet the freezer never seemed overstocked, never seemed full. Where was it all going? I tried asking Asher about it one night. We were closing together. It was just the two of us. I thought maybe he'd be more willing to talk. "Hey, have you ever noticed how much meat we get delivered? It seems like a lot, doesn't it?" He stopped what he was doing. Stopped mid-motion like someone had pressed pause on him. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly, he turned to look at me, and his eyes. God, his eyes were so sad, so defeated. "Dylan, please." His voice cracked. "Please just stop. Stop asking questions. Stop noticing things. Stop thinking about it. For your own sake. But, did you know there was a girl who worked here before you?" He cut me off, his voice low, urgent. Her name was Stella Whitfield. She was 19, just like you. Smart, curious. Also just like you. He paused, taking a shaky breath. She started noticing things. Started asking the same questions you're asking. Started poking around in places she shouldn't have been poking around in. Trying to figure out what the special was. Trying to understand what was happening in that freezer. He walked closer to me, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. They found her car 3 weeks later. Parked near the river. Doors wide open. Keys still in ignition. Her purse still on the passenger seat. Phone, wallet, everything. But no Stella. The police searched for weeks. Months. They dragged the river. Combed the nearby woods. Put up missing person posters all over town. Nothing. She just vanished. Like she'd never existed. My mouth went dry. And you think, what? That Wyatt did something to her. I don't think anything. Asher said firmly. I don't think. I don't wonder. I don't question. Because thinking gets you killed. Wondering gets you killed. Questioning definitely gets you killed. I just do my job. I serve the regular customers. I clean the fryers. I mop the floors. And when someone asks for the special, I get Wyatt immediately, and I forget I ever saw them. That's it. That's all I do. And that's all you should do too if you want to see your 20th birthday. But I couldn't let it go. You have to understand. I'm not brave. I'm not some hero looking for adventure. I'm stubborn. When someone tells me not to look at something, my brain fixates on it, becomes obsessed with it. It's like an itch I can't scratch, a puzzle I can't solve. And the more Asher warned me to stay away, the more I needed to know. So I started investigating. Carefully, quietly. I started paying closer attention to everything. I memorized the schedules of the strange customers, Tuesdays and Fridays mostly, always between 10 and midnight. I started keeping a log on my phone, noting descriptions, times, anything unusual. And there were patterns, definite patterns. The customers always came alone, never in groups, never with companions. They always wore long coats or jackets, even when the weather didn't warrant it. They all moved with that same fluid grace, that same otherworldly quality. And their eyes, always those strange eyes, colors that seemed to glow in certain lights, colors that didn't look quite natural. I also started researching the restaurant itself. The building had been built in 1973, originally as a different fast food franchise. That company had gone bankrupt in the early 80s, and the building had sat empty for several years before being bought and converted to its current brand in 1989. But here's the interesting part. The land it was built on, the land beneath us, it was much older. I found old newspaper articles at the library, going back over 100 years. The area had once been part of the old industrial district. Before that, in the 1800s, it had been marshland, wetlands that were considered unusable. There were stories, folk tales really about the marsh, about strange lights that would appear at night, about sounds coming from underground, about people who ventured too deep into the marsh and never returned. The local indigenous people had considered the area cursed, forbidden. They had stories about something that lived beneath the earth, something old, something that had been there long before humans arrived, something that was always hungry. Of course, when the Industrial Revolution came, nobody cared about old superstitions. The marsh was drained, the land was developed, factories were built, warehouses, processing plants, and life went on. But there were still stories. Workers who disappeared on night shifts, strange sounds in the basements of old buildings, sections of certain factories that were sealed off for no apparent reason. One article from 1952 caught my attention. It was about a meat processing plant that had operated not far from where our restaurant now stood. There had been an incident. The article was vague on details, but apparently several workers had gone missing over the course of a few months. The plant had been investigated, temporarily shut down, but no evidence of wrongdoing was ever found. The missing workers were written off as having simply quit and moved on, despite the fact that they'd left behind all their belongings, their families, their entire lives. The plant had eventually closed in the 70s, around the same time our building was constructed. I wondered if they were connected, if whatever had been feeding at the processing plant had simply moved, relocated to a new source of sustenance. But I needed proof, real proof, not just coincidences and old stories. So I decided, in what I now recognize as possibly the stupidest decision of my life, to investigate the freezer, to see for myself what was behind that inner door, to understand once and for all what the special was. I waited for the perfect opportunity, and it came about 6 weeks into my employment. A Thursday night. Wyatt called in sick, which almost never happened. The manager from the morning shift, some guy I'd barely met, agreed to come in and cover for the evening, but said he'd only stay until 10. After that, it would just be me and Asher closing, just the two of us. Around 11, like clockwork, Asher announced he was going out for a smoke break. He did this every night, always at the same time, always for exactly 15 minutes. It was the only time he seemed to relax, the only time the tension left his shoulders. I watched him head out the back door, watched him disappear into the alley, and then I made my move. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to forget about this. But I couldn't. I had to know. I had to understand. So I walked across the kitchen, my footsteps seeming impossibly loud in the quiet restaurant, and I pulled open the freezer door. The cold hit me immediately, that sharp, biting cold that makes your lungs ache. I stepped inside, my breath coming out in white clouds. The main area looked normal, exactly as it always did. Boxes of frozen fries stacked neatly, racks of burger patties, bags of chicken, containers of sauces and toppings, all perfectly ordinary. But I knew there was more. I'd seen Wyatt and Asher go deeper, past all this, to the back. I moved slowly, carefully, past the normal storage. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, making the shadows dance. And that smell, even through the cold, even through the frost in my nostrils, I could smell it. That sweet, rotten smell, but stronger here, much stronger, like it was emanating from something close by, at the very back of the freezer, partially hidden behind a tall rack of boxes. I found it. Another door. This one was different from the freezer door. It was older, made of thick, heavy metal that looked like it had been there far longer than the restaurant. There was a wheel lock on it, like you'd see on a ship's hatch or a bank vault. And next to the lock, carved into the metal, were symbols, strange symbols that hurt to look at, that seemed to writhe and shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I stood there for a moment, my hand hovering over the wheel. This was my last chance to turn back, my last chance to walk away, to listen to the warnings, to save myself. But that stubborn part of my brain, that curious part that had to know, reached out and grasped the cold metal. The wheel turned easier than I expected, like it was used frequently, well maintained. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk that seemed to echo through the freezer. And then, slowly, I pulled the door open. What greeted me made absolutely no sense. The space beyond shouldn't have existed. The freezer from the outside was maybe 12 feet deep, but this room, this space, it stretched back impossibly far. I could see at least 30 or 40 feet, and even then the back wall was shrouded in shadow. Too far, way too far to fit in the building. And the walls, they weren't metal like the freezer. They were stone, ancient stone, gray and rough, and covered in more of those symbols, those markings that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on them. They seemed to pulse, to breathe, like they were alive somehow. And the temperature, it was all wrong. It should have been freezing, below freezing. But it was warm, uncomfortably warm. Humid even, like stepping into a greenhouse or a terrarium. The lighting came from somewhere I couldn't identify, a dim reddish glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, casting everything in this sick crimson hue. And in that light, hanging from hooks along both walls, oh God, oh Jesus Christ, they were cuts of meat, large irregular pieces, hanging from industrial hooks. But the texture was wrong, the color was wrong, the shape was wrong. This wasn't beef, wasn't pork, wasn't any animal I'd ever seen butchered. Some of the pieces they still had. I saw skin, human skin, pale and waxy. I saw what looked unmistakably like fingers, a hand, severed at the wrist, hanging from its own hook. Further down, partially hidden in shadow, something that looked like a torso, ribs exposed, organs missing. And attached to several of the pieces, still clinging to the flesh, were scraps of clothing, a piece of fabric that might have been from a shirt, part of what looked like a name tag. My stomach heaved. I bent over, trying not to vomit, trying not to scream. My brain was refusing to process what I was seeing, refusing to accept the reality in front of me. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare, a hallucination, anything but real. But it was real. The smell was real. That sweet, rotten smell of decay mixed with something else, something chemical, like formaldehyde or preservatives. The sight was real, those pieces of human beings hanging like livestock in a butcher shop. The cold, sick horror crawling up my spine was real. And then, from deeper in that impossible room, I heard something, a sound that made every hair on my body stand straight up, breathing deep, wet, rasping. But not just one breath, multiple breaths, overlapping, out of sync with each other, like several things breathing together, but not quite in unison. And beneath the breathing, voices, multiple voices speaking as one. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, seemed to vibrate through the stone walls, through the floor, through my very bones. Fresh one, new one, young one, come closer, come see, come deeper, come feed. The voices were wrong. They sounded like they were trying to form human words, but couldn't quite manage it. Like something inhuman attempting to speak through a human throat. The consonants were too harsh, the vowels too long, And underneath the words I could hear other sounds, clicking, scraping, wet squelching sound that made my skin crawl. I stumbled backward, my legs weak, my whole body shaking. I had to get out, had to leave, had to run. My hand reached for the door, grabbed it, started to pull it closed. And that's when I saw movement in the shadows at the back of the room. Something large, something massive, shifting in the darkness. Multiple somethings. I caught glimpses of limbs, too many limbs, of eyes, dozens of eyes, reflecting that red light of mouths. Oh God, the mouths, opening and closing, filled with teeth, so many teeth. I slammed the door shut, my hand shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I spun it, locked it, heard it click into place. And then I ran. I ran out of the freezer, out into the kitchen, and straight into someone. Asher. He caught me by the shoulders, stopping my momentum. And when he saw my face, when he saw the absolute terror written across my features, his expression changed from surprise to resignation, to a deep bone-weary sadness. You looked. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, flat, final. Even after I warned you, even after I told you what happened to Stella, you looked anyway. I couldn't speak, couldn't form words. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face, my whole body trembling. Asher's grip on my shoulders tightened. And then he was moving, pulling me, dragging me toward the back exit, the employee exit that led to the alley. He pushed the door open, shoved me outside into the cool night air. The contrast between the warm humidity of that impossible room and the crisp autumn air was jarring, disorienting. I gasped, sucking in deep breaths, trying to clear my lungs of that rotten sweet smell. Listen to me very carefully. Asher's face was inches from mine, his eyes boring into me. You have two choices right now. Only two. Choice one, you forget everything you saw. You bury it deep. You never speak of it, never think about it. You come back tomorrow. You do your job. You keep your head down. And maybe, they'll let you live. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to just be traumatized instead of dead. Or, his voice dropped even lower, became almost a whisper. Choice two, you run. Right now. Tonight. You quit. You pack your things. You leave this town, and you never come back. You run far and you run fast, and you pray. You pray to whatever God you believe, and that they don't decide to come after you. What? My voice came out as a croak. What are they? What was that thing? Those things? That. Asher looked over his shoulder nervously, like he was afraid of being overheard. That is the question you should never have asked. The question that gets people killed. But you know. I grabbed his arm, desperate. You know what they are. You've seen them too. Knowing doesn't help. Asher said quietly. Knowing doesn't save you. It just makes the nightmares worse. He paused, seemed to struggle with something internally. Then he sighed, a long defeated sound. But since you've already seen, since you've already opened that door, I guess it doesn't matter anymore. He glanced around the alley again, making sure we were alone. I don't know what they are. Not really. Not their true nature. But I know what Wyatt told me, after the first time I saw them, after the first time they made me help with a delivery. His voice caught on the last word. He said they've been here for a very long time. Long before this town, long before humans settled this area. They sleep deep underground, in caverns and tunnels that extend for miles. Maybe they've always been here. Maybe they came from somewhere else. He didn't know and didn't care. He said the local tribes knew about them, made offerings to keep them satisfied, to keep them from rising up and taking what they wanted. When white settlers came, when they started building, they disturbed something, woke something up, and people started disappearing. Workers on night shifts, travelers passing through, children who wandered too far from home. Asher's hands were shaking as he spoke. Eventually, someone figured out an arrangement, a deal. Regular offerings, regular feeding. In exchange for being left alone, the things beneath would stay beneath, would only take what was given to them, wouldn't hunt freely. And that arrangement has been maintained for over 100 years, passed down, kept secret. Different businesses, different places, but always the same deal. The processing plant. I whispered, in the 50s. Yes, Asher nodded. And before that, other places. The marsh, the wetlands, all the stories about people vanishing. It was all feeding the same things. And when the processing plant closed, when this restaurant was built, the arrangement continued. Just a new location, a new cover. But why? I shook my head, trying to understand. Why fast food? Why not just? I don't know. Why involve customers at all? Because they need to consent. Asher said, and there was something horrible in his voice. The things beneath, they have rules. Old rules. Rules that even they can't break. They can't just take anyone. The person has to offer themselves, has to come willingly, has to ask for the special. He laughed, a bitter broken sound. That's why it works. The ones who ask for the special. They're not human, not anymore. They're servants, extensions of the things beneath, wearing human shapes, coming up to collect, to gather, to select the offerings. My mind was reeling. The meat in that room, the pieces hanging on hooks. Previous offerings. Asher's voice was barely audible now. People who asked too many questions. People who saw too much. People who tried to leave after learning the truth. They're kept there, preserved somehow, fed to the things beneath piece by piece. Nothing goes to waste. He looked at me with hollow eyes. Stella's probably in there somewhere. What's left of her? I felt bile rise in my throat, fought it down. And you? I stared at him. You help with this. You're part of this. I want to live. His voice broke. I want to survive. Is that so wrong? I tried to run once. About a year ago. I got 3 hours away before my car just stopped. Engine died. No reason. And then I saw them. On the side of the road. Emerging from a tree line. Their real forms. Not the human shapes they wear. Their actual forms. He shuddered. They brought me back. Told me I'd used up my one chance. Told me that if I tried again, or if I talked, or if I did anything except exactly what I was told, I'd end up on those hooks. Conscious. Aware. Feeling every cut, every bite, for as long as they wanted to make it last. He grabbed my shoulders again, shook me slightly. So I'm telling you, Dylan. I'm begging you. Run. Right now. Run far and run fast, and don't look back. And pray. Pray that they consider you too much trouble to chase, too insignificant to bother with, because that's your only chance. But I started to speak, started to ask another question, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps, coming from inside the restaurant. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. He's coming. Asher's face went white. Wyatt's here. He lied about being sick. He's been here the whole time, watching, waiting to see if you'd look, if you'd open that door. He released me. Stepped back. Run, Dylan. Run now. But before I could move, before I could even process what was happening, the back door opened and Wyatt stepped out into the alley. He looked at me, then at Asher, and his tired expression shifted into something that was almost sad, almost regretful. I had really hoped. He said quietly, that you'd be smarter than this, Dylan, that you'd listen to the warnings, that you'd just do your job and not ask questions. I liked you. You were a good worker, reliable. It would have been nice to have someone stick around for more than a few months. I backed away from him, my heart pounding. I'm quitting. Right now. I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. I won't tell anyone. I swear. I'll forget everything I saw. Wyatt tilted his head, studying me like I was a specimen under a microscope. You see, that's exactly what Stella said, word for word, right before she ran. He took a step closer. We gave her a 3-day head start. Sporting chance. Wanted to see how far she'd get, how clever she'd be. Another step. She made it almost 100 miles before they found her. Tracked her by scent, by the knowledge she carried, by the memory of what she'd seen. Who? My voice came out as a whisper. Who found her? Wyatt smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was something else wearing his face. His teeth seemed longer, sharper. Too many of them. The ones we serve. The ones who sleep beneath, in the old places, the deep places. The ones who've been here since before your ancestors learned to make fire. His eyes, his normal tired human eyes, suddenly flashed that amber color, that inhuman glow. They're always hungry. So very, very hungry. And we feed them. We've been feeding them for generations. In exchange, they let us live. They let this town prosper. They stay beneath mostly. It's a simple arrangement, really. Wyatt continued, his voice taking on that same wrong quality I'd heard from the things in the room, like multiple voices speaking in imperfect unison. We provide regular offerings, regular meals, and they don't rise up, don't hunt freely, don't take whoever they want whenever they want. Instead, they wait, patient, feeding on what we give them, on people who won't be missed, drifters, runaways, and occasionally. His smile widened impossibly. Curious employees who can't leave well enough alone. Asher was pressed against the wall of the alley now, his face a mask of terror. Wyatt, please. Come on. Give him a chance. He's just a kid. He's scared. He won't talk. You said the same thing about Stella. Wyatt's eyes never left me. And you were wrong. She tried to go to the police. Tried to tell them about us, about this place. Of course, they didn't believe her. Thought she was on drugs, having a breakdown. But the attempt was made. The rules were broken. He took another step toward me. And so we had to expand our arrangement. Had to bring in more from outside. More servants, more gatherers, to make up for her contribution to the collection. That's when I understood, truly understood, the customers who asked for the special. They weren't just servants of the things beneath. They were scouts, hunters, gathering intelligence, selecting targets, people who were vulnerable, people who were alone, people who wouldn't be missed. They'd wear human shapes, human faces, come into the restaurant, ask for the special, and somewhere in that transaction, somehow, they'd identify their next offering, their next meal. And I'd seen them. I'd seen their true nature. I knew what they were, which made me dangerous, made me a liability, made me the next offering. I don't want to do this, Dylan. Wyatt said, and for just a moment his voice sounded almost human again, almost regretful. But you've seen too much. You know too much. And the rules are very clear. Those who see must either serve or feed. His expression hardened. And you don't strike me as someone willing to serve. I didn't think, didn't plan. I just moved. I turned and ran. Ran as fast as I've ever run in my life. Down the alley, toward the street. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But terror drove me forward. Pure primal survival instinct overriding everything else. Behind me I heard Wyatt shout something. Heard Asher yell. But I didn't look back. Didn't slow down. I reached the end of the alley. Burst out onto the sidewalk. Nearly got hit by a car whose driver honked angrily. I kept running. Down the block. Around the corner. Toward where I'd parked my car. And that's when I heard them. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Behind me. Getting closer. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and what I saw nearly made me stumble. There were shapes. Figures. Emerging from the alley. From between buildings. From the shadows themselves. They looked human from a distance. But as they got closer I could see the wrongness. The way they moved. Too fluid. Too fast. Their limbs bending at angles that weren't quite right. And their eyes. Oh God, their eyes. Glowing in the darkness. Amber. Pale blue. Violet. All fixed on me. All tracking me like predators tracking prey. My car was 2 blocks away. It felt like miles. I pushed myself harder. Faster. My lungs felt like they were tearing. My heart felt like it would explode. But I couldn't stop. Couldn't slow down. Behind me the footsteps were getting closer. Closer. I could hear breathing now. That same wet, rasping breathing I'd heard in that impossible room. 1 block away. Half a block. I could see my car now. Could see it parked under a streetlight. I fumbled in my pocket for my keys. Nearly dropped them. Caught them at the last second. 20 feet. 10 feet. 5. I reached the car. Jammed the key into the lock. My hand was shaking so badly it took 3 tries. Finally got it open. Threw myself inside. Slammed the door. Hit the lock button. The footsteps reached my car just as the locks engaged. Something. Someone. Something. Hit the driver's side window hard enough to make it crack. I screamed. Started the engine with shaking hands. Threw the car into gear. As I peeled out, tires screeching. I looked in the rearview mirror, and what I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. They were standing in the middle of the street. 5, no, 6, no, more, too many to count. Shapes that looked almost human, but not quite. And in the center, standing perfectly still, was Wyatt. But he wasn't alone. There was something behind him. Something large. Something that seemed to be made of shadows, and too many limbs and eyes that glowed like hot coals. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that couldn't exist, but did. And they were all looking at me, even from a distance. Even as I sped away, I could feel their eyes on me, feel their attention, their hunger, their promise that this wasn't over, that they'd find me. Eventually, I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove, through the town, out onto the highway, away from that place, away from those things. I drove until my hands stopped shaking enough to pull out my phone. Called my dad. It was 3 in the morning, but I didn't care. He answered on the second ring. Groggy. Concerned. Dylan, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I broke down. Right there on the side of the highway. Pulled over and just broke down. Sobbing. Hyperventilating. Tried to explain what I'd seen. What I'd discovered. What was chasing me. My dad. To his credit, he listened. Really listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't tell me I was crazy. Just let me talk until I'd said everything. When I finally went quiet, exhausted, hoarse from crying, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that made my blood run cold all over again. When I was 22, before I met your mother, I worked at a meat processing plant. This was in a different state, different town. But, he paused. I could hear him breathing heavily. There was a basement, a special area, where they kept certain orders. One night I was working late, covering for someone, and I heard sounds coming from down there. Voices, but not human voices. Not quite. And I went to look. I went down those stairs, and I saw. His voice cracked. I saw things I still can't explain. Things that shouldn't exist. Things with too many mouths. Too many eyes. Feeding on. I ran. He continued. Quit that night. Packed my things. Moved 3 states away. Met your mother. Started a new life. And I spent 30 years trying to convince myself it was a hallucination. A nightmare. That wasn't real. He took a shaky breath. But it sounds like whatever I saw. Whatever those things were. They're not isolated. They're not unique. They're everywhere. Or at least, in more places than I ever wanted to believe. He helped me. My dad. He drove out to meet me that night. Brought cash. Brought a plan. By dawn we'd worked out a strategy. I'd leave town immediately. Go west. Keep moving for a while. Never stay in one place too long. He'd handle closing my apartment. Settling my affairs. Making sure there was nothing to tie me to that place. No reason for anyone. Anything. To come looking. Before I left. Before I got on that bus heading to the other side of the country. My dad grabbed my shoulders. Looked me dead in the eyes. Listened to me very carefully. You need to understand the rules. The way they seem to work. They can track you by scent. By the knowledge you carry. By the memory of what you've seen. But their range is limited. At least, I think it's limited. I got far enough away that they stopped following. Stopped caring. Maybe you will too. Never eat at any fast food restaurant that feels off. That has that smell. That underlying wrongness. Those are their places. Their feeding grounds. There are probably more than you think. Scattered around. But you'll know them when you smell them. Trust your instincts. And most importantly, his grip tightened. Don't go looking for answers. Don't try to research them. Don't try to understand them. The more you know, the more you dig, the easier it is for them to find you. Knowledge is like blood in the water to these things. So forget, as much as you can. Try to forget. But I couldn't forget. How do you forget something like that? How do you unsee what I saw hanging on those hooks? How do you unhear those voices? That breathing? So instead I ran. And I've been running ever since. That was almost 3 years ago. I've moved 5 times now. Never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. I work remotely. freelance coding, web design, anything that lets me work from home, from whatever temporary home I'm currently calling safe. I don't go out much, don't socialize, don't form attachments, because attachments are liabilities, connections that can be traced, that can be followed. I've become paranoid. I know I have. I check every shadow, every dark corner. I never walk alone at night, never go anywhere without multiple exits. I sleep with the lights on, with my keys in my hand, ready to run at a moment's notice. It's not living, not really. It's just existing, surviving, waiting for the inevitable moment when they find me, because I know they're still looking. I know they haven't forgotten. About 6 months after I ran, after I'd started to convince myself that maybe I'd gotten far enough away, maybe I was safe, I saw him. I was in a grocery store, just buying basic supplies, trying to blend in, trying to be normal, and I turned down the cereal aisle, and there he was, Asher, standing at the other end, just standing there, watching me. Our eyes met across the distance, and he gave me this sad smile, this pitying expression, and then he mouthed two words that shattered whatever illusion of safety I'd built. They know. I left everything in my cart, walked straight out of the store, got in my car and drove. I moved that same night, didn't even pack properly, just threw essentials in a bag and left. Found a new apartment 3 states over, a new identity, a new life. Again, since then I've been even more careful, even more paranoid. I've started researching, despite my father's warnings, despite knowing that every bit of knowledge makes me easier to find. I can't help it. That same stubborn curiosity that got me into this mess in the first place. And what I've found, it's worse than I imagined. I started with missing persons reports, cross-referenced with locations of that particular fast food chain, specifically older locations, buildings that had been standing for decades, always in areas near industrial districts, near old town centers, near places where the ground is old, where the bedrock runs deep, and the pattern is unmistakable. There are 17 locations that match the profile, 17 buildings with that same wrong smell, that same high turnover rate, that same proximity to old deep places. And around each one, going back decades, there are missing persons cases, people who vanished without a trace, always alone, always at night, always near these locations. The numbers vary. Some places have only a few, 2 or 3 over the years. Others have dozens, clusters of disappearances that are written off as unrelated, as coincidence, as runaways and drifters who simply moved on. But they didn't move on. They're feeding the things beneath, the things that sleep in the old places, the things that have been here longer than we have. And it's not just that one chain. As I dug deeper, cross-referenced other patterns, I found more. A pizza place in Oregon, a burger joint in Louisiana, a sandwich shop in Pennsylvania, all older buildings, all with that same pattern of disappearances, that same wrong feeling. There's a network. I'm convinced of it now. Not organized exactly, not some grand conspiracy, but rather multiple points of contact, multiple feeding grounds, places where the barrier between our world and whatever is beneath, whatever these things are, is thin, where deals have been made, arrangements established, trade agreements between the surface and the deep. I've tried to map it, to identify all the locations, to warn people somehow. But who would believe me? If I went to the authorities, told them what I know, what I've seen, they'd think I was insane. They'd lock me up. And worse, it would draw attention, would let them know exactly where I am. So instead I started this channel, started telling stories, horror stories, fiction, or at least, that's what I tell people. That's what I tell you, that these are just stories, just creepy tales to entertain, to scare. But you know better now, don't you? You know this isn't fiction. This is real. This is happening, right now, in places you've probably driven past, eaten at, never given a second thought. And that's why I need you to listen, really listen, because I'm telling you how to survive, how to recognize these places, how to stay safe. First, trust your instincts. If you walk into any restaurant, any business, and something feels wrong, if there's a smell you can't place, if the employees look haunted, if you feel that prickling sensation on the back of your neck that says danger, leave immediately. Don't order. Don't stay. Don't convince yourself you're being silly. Your subconscious is picking up on signals your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Trust it. Second, pay attention to patterns. High employee turnover, locations in older buildings, proximity to industrial areas or old town centers. Any business that seems to have been there forever despite never being busy. These are red flags. Third, and this is critical, if you ever witness someone asking for something off menu, something special, something that makes the staff react strangely, leave immediately. Don't stay to see what happens. Don't be curious. Just leave, because what you'll witness, it's not something you can unsee. And once you know, once you've seen, you become marked, become a target. I've also learned some other things. Through observation, through research, through painful trial and error. They can't cross running water easily. Rivers, streams. If you're being chased, if you feel them closing in, find water. Cross it. It won't stop them permanently, but it buys time, confuses their tracking. They're strongest at night, most active between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. That's when the barriers are thinnest, when they can move most freely between beneath and above. During daylight hours they're weaker, still dangerous, but constrained somehow. They don't like iron, real iron, not steel, not alloys, but pure iron. I don't know why. Some property of the metal, some interaction with whatever they're made of, but iron burns them, repels them. I carry iron nails in my pockets now, everywhere I go, just in case. And finally, they seem bound by strange rules, old rules. They can't just take anyone. There has to be consent of some kind, an offering, a willingness, even if that willingness comes through ignorance, through curiosity, through not knowing what you're consenting to. But there has to be that moment, that choice. That's why they set up the restaurants, the feeding grounds, places where people can unknowingly consent, can offer themselves without understanding what they're doing. It's been 2 years and 7 months since I ran, since I escaped, and in that time I've learned to survive, to exist in the margins, to be invisible. But I'm tired, so very tired, tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of being afraid every single moment of every single day. Last week something happened that made me realize, made me understand, that my time is running out. I got an email from an unknown sender. No subject line, no message, just an attachment. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew I shouldn't have. But that same fatal curiosity that started all this, I couldn't help myself. The image loaded slowly and went fully rendered. When I saw what it was, my blood turned to ice. It was a photograph, taken inside that room, that impossible room behind the freezer. I recognized the stone walls, the red lighting, the hooks. But in this photo, in this new photo, one of the hooks was different. It had a piece of paper attached to it, a sign, and written on that sign, in what I desperately hoped was red paint, but fear was something else, with 3 words, special order pending. And underneath those words, taped to the sign, was a photograph, a small photograph, printed from a phone or a computer, a photograph of me, recent, from maybe 2 weeks ago, taken outside my current apartment. I'm unlocking my door, unaware that I'm being watched, being photographed, being marked. They know where I am. They've known for weeks, maybe longer. They're just waiting, playing with their food, letting the fear build, letting me understand what's coming. I should run again. I should pack up tonight, this instant, and disappear, find a new place, a new identity, keep moving, keep running. But where would I go? How far would I have to run? And for how long? The rest of my life. Always looking back, always afraid, always waiting for that inevitable moment when they finally catch up. Part of me, a growing part, is almost ready to just stop running, stop fighting, accept what's coming, because this isn't living. this existence, this constant terror. Maybe it would be better to just get over with, face whatever's waiting. At least then it would be done. The waiting would be over. The fear would have an end point. But I'm not there yet. Not quite. There's still enough survival instinct, enough stubborn will to live, that I'll keep running, keep trying. For now, even though I know, deep down in my bones I know, that eventually, my luck will run out. Eventually they'll stop playing, stop waiting, and that hook with my name on it, that special order pending, will be fulfilled. That's why I'm making this video. Why I'm telling you this story. Because you need to know. You need to understand. What's out there? What's beneath? What's hiding in plain sight, in places you think are safe, in places you trust? Check your local area. Look for those older fast food locations. The ones that smell wrong. The ones with high turnover. The ones where employees look haunted and broken. And stay away from them. Far away. Don't eat there. Don't work there. Don't even drive past them if you can help it. And if you do find yourself in one of these places, if you didn't know, if you couldn't tell until it was too late, and you witness someone asking for the special, the one not on the menu, run. Get out immediately. Don't look back. Don't try to help. Don't be curious. Just run and don't stop running until you're far, very far, away. Because once you see, once you know, you can never unknow. You can never unsee. And they will come for you. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, they always collect. They always feed. And they are always hungry. I've been recording this video in segments, over several days, and I need to stop now, need to move again, because last night, as I was trying to sleep, I heard something, outside my window, on the 3rd floor, where nothing should be able to reach. I heard breathing, that same wet rasping breathing, and scratching, long slow scratches against the glass, like something testing, exploring, finding weaknesses. I didn't look. I couldn't look. I just lay there, frozen, barely breathing, waiting for the sound to stop. It lasted for maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. Time became meaningless, but eventually it stopped. The scratching faded, the breathing receded, and I was alone again, in the darkness, with my terror. But they were here. They found me. They're done waiting, done playing. The hunt is active now. And I don't know how much time I have left. So please, learn from my mistakes. Don't be curious. Don't ask questions. Don't look behind doors that are meant to stay closed. Some knowledge isn't worth the price. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. And some specials definitely aren't meant to be ordered. If this is my last video, if I disappear, if this channel goes silent, you'll know why. You'll know what happened. And maybe you'll remember my story, my warning, and maybe it will save you. Save someone. Make my death, if it comes, worth something. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And please, before you go, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, but so you'll remember. So this warning will stay with you. Leave a comment. Tell me you understand. Tell me you'll be careful. Tell me this wasn't for nothing. And most importantly, look around where you live. Identify the danger zones, the feeding grounds, and stay away. Stay far away, because they're out there. More of them than you think. Waiting, feeding, growing stronger. Never, ever, order the special.